Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. And what we're looking at is my blank sandbox. And so this is what your shell is pretty much going to look like when you get your brand new shell for spring. And we're going to look at two things. We're going to look at setting up the grades tool with a basic grade book. And we're going to look at posting a syllabus under your course map. So first, let's go through the grades. And so there you see my little Zoom screen. And the grades are found in the blue navigation bar at the top of the page. So you'll just click on grades. And the first thing it's going to do is ask you to set up your settings. Now, we're going to walk through this real quick, but as you'll see later, these are not set in stone. So whatever you pick here, if you change your mind later, you can go back and change your settings. So let's click to start. And the first thing you pick is whether you want weighted grades or points grades. So we're going to do points first. So I'm going to leave it selected on points. Next, to step 2 is what final grade do you want released? Now, it's important to note that this doesn't actually release the final grades. It just lets you choose what's going to be released when you do release them. So we want to release that calculated final grade. And this is the total that D2L keeps automatically. The other option is an adjusted final grade, and that's something you enter manually, and I really don't know very many people who do that. So leaving it on the calculated final grade is probably the best idea. Step 3 is the grade calculations. And this is how you want D2L to treat different details about your grades. So how do you want it to treat ungraded items? And when it says ungraded items, it means things that either a student missed and you don't have a grade for them, or that you haven't graded yet in the future. So it applies to both things. Do you want it to drop that ungraded item? And now that would mean, though, that if a student legitimately missed an assignment, that you would need to go ahead and manually enter that 0 into the grade book so that their final grade calculation is accurate. The other one, treat ungraded items as 0, automatically puts a 0 into anything that's not graded. So that means if they miss the assignment, it'll automatically put in a 0, but it also means that anything that hasn't been graded yet from the beginning of the course is already counted as a 0. So when the students look at their grades, it actually does show that they have an F beginning at the start of the class. So you may not want to pick that one because it does cause general panic for a lot of students. So doing the drop ungraded item gives them a much better picture of what their grade actually is as you go along. Now be sure this auto update is selected. You do want it to automatically keep final grades updated as you're going through the class. So let's click continue. Next is choosing your default grade scheme. A grade scheme is that breakdown of your grading scale. You know, 90 to 100, 80 to 89, et cetera, et cetera. And that A through F scale. It defaults right here to A through F percentages. So it already has put in there that standard grade scale and the A through F letter grades that are assigned to each level. So most people stick to that grade scale, so you can leave this at the default. Step 5 is managing view display options. And this is for your view. You are the manager, so it's the managing view. And all it's asking you here is how many decimal places do you want displayed? And it defaults to 2, which is pretty much enough for most of the courses I've seen. This is on step 6, your student view display options. And this is the view for the students of what you want them to be able to see. You have the option of showing them their points grade, the grade scheme symbol, which is A through F, and the grade scheme color, which is a color-coded scheme to highlight what their grade is. So A has, I believe, a green, and F has what's almost a red. It's kind of a dark pink. They don't actually give us a red. And the decimal places that you want displayed for the students. This should match what you have in your view. Now, if you put in 0 decimal places, it will round that number for you if you want to do that. Otherwise, leave the decimal places at their default at 2, and it'll give you those details. This is the characters you want displayed per grade item, and that's just it's defaulted to 15, and that's usually plenty to display the name of a grade. And you do want this checked, final grade calculation. And display final grade calculation to users. Again, this doesn't actually release those grades. You have another process you have to do to release the grades to the students, but this enables those to be released in the first place. So this is step 7, and step 7 is your summary. And it just basically summarizes what you just selected. So there's nothing to actually select on this page, and you can just finish. Now this page is when you actually start building your pieces of your gradebook. And this particular page will only show one time. So right now, when you finish those initial settings is the only time you're going to see this page. So let's start off. The first option it says is to create a new grade category. And it's really a good idea to set up your gradebook in categories. So it's a lot easier for the students to find like where their quizzes are, where their papers are, where their exams are, their midterm, final. All of that is already broken down into categories so that they can find it easier on their display. So we're going to start by creating a new grade category. So this category, we have to give it a name. And so I'm just going to call it quizzes. And again, this is, you'll set it up for whatever you have in your syllabus for your own breakdown of grades in the categories that you use. These are just examples. Short name actually doesn't display anywhere, so you can skip that one and leave it blank. We're going to skip the description because, again, that's not going to display for you or for the students. Grading gives you a bunch of different options for this grade. Can exceed means do you want it to have the option of exceeding the maximum number of points? For instance, on a quiz, is it possible for them to get more than the maximum? If the maximum is 25 points, can they get 27 points, let's say with a bonus item? If you want this to not be included in the final grade calculation, you can select this box and exclude it from that final calculation. Distribution has to do with how you want it to set up the items that we will create in this category. So you can automatically set all of the point values for things in this category. For instance, all my quizzes in this instance, I want to make them all worth 10 points. So I can select distribution to distribute points across all items, and then tell it how many points per item. So it will automatically, as I create those grade items, now set up my quizzes to be 10 points each. If you have varying point values within a category, don't select this. I can also select the number of highest non-bonus items to drop from each user in this category. Now, I haven't run across anyone yet who drops a student's highest grade, but you can do that here. And the second one is the number of lowest non-bonus items to drop for each user. So if you want to drop the lowest quiz grade, you could select here and tell it to drop 1 or however many you want dropped from this calculation. The display options, we can actually skip everything else on here because they are not critical display options, and sometimes may create a lot of questioning about the points distribution in your course and things like that, the statistics that you may or may not want the students to see and be asking about. So we do save and close. And now we see what's called the Manage Grade screen. And the categories are in gray. So there's my first category of quizzes. And then here is my item for the final calculated grade and for the final adjusted grade. Remember, in this case, we're going to release the final calculated grade. So I'm going to create some items in my quizzes. So up here at the top of the page, the blue button you have says New. Click that and it gives you a list of items. You can do grade items or grade categories. Right now we're going to create a grade item. And you have several different options here for the type of grade item you want to use. For this example, we're going to stick with the numeric grades. That's the most common. So in this case, now I'm going to set up my grade item for the first quiz. So again, I have to name it. So quiz, I'm just going to call it quiz 1. I'm going to skip the short name. And here's where I select what category I want it in. I already have the quiz category set up, so I can just select quizzes there. So it will automatically put this item under that category for me. Under grading, we select maximum points, and notice it's already populated with 10. And if I click on it, I actually can't change that. It doesn't let me change that. And here are my other options, just like we saw with the categories. I can select that it can exceed the total number of points, or if this is a bonus or extra credit item, I can mark that here. I can also choose to exclude it from the final grade calculation if I want. If I'm going to change the grade scheme away from that default that we talked about, then I can select my other scheme here. If I have a rubric that I want the students to see that I've built in D2L, now this isn't your like Word document rubrics that you might have. This is for attaching a rubric that has been built in D2L. I can add that rubric here. And again, we're going to skip the display options. Do save and close. Now you can see how it's starting to build out the items, and they're slightly indented from the categories, and they're in white so you can more clearly see them. So let me repeat that process one more time and create another grade item. I'm going to choose numeric. I'm going to call it quiz 2. I'm going to select my category. And my maximum points are already set. So, and I don't want to select any of these things, so I can just go to Save and Close. Now notice, if I create another item, I'm not going to go all the way through this one. Down at the bottom, next to Save and Close, I also have Save and New, or just Save. So Save and New, if I selected that, it would save this item and take me to a new blank screen to create another grade item. So I don't have to keep going back and forth to that Manage Grade screen. If I just click Save, it'll just save this page and stay on this page if I want it to. Let me cancel out of this. So let's create another category. New category. I'm going to call this one Papers. Oops. Typo. Okay, so again, like we saw with the other category that we created, I can select Can Exceed if I want the grades to exceed my basic maximum points. Now, you saw on the grade items where we can select to make it a bonus item. To make the final grade calculation come out correctly, if you have a bonus item in a category, you want to select Can Exceed so that it adds extra points to that category to give credit for that bonus item. And then your final grade calculation will be more accurate. So I don't want to select any of these others because I'm going to have different point values for my papers. Save and Close. So let's create an item for the papers. Numeric. Let's call this a research paper. Oops. Select my category, Papers. And you'll see it defaults to 10 here, but I can change this now. So I'm going to have 20 points for this paper. It's not a bonus item, and I'm not going to have it exceed the maximum points. So I'm just going to save and new for this one to create another paper. And again, I want a numeric grade. Let's make this a journal. Oops. There's my category. This one I'm going to make worth 15 points. Save and Close. So you see how this gradebook is starting to build out. Let me show you what it looks like on the Intergrade screen. Intergrades will give you more of your spreadsheet type of view. So you see how this is starting to appear with my students listed over here, my categories with the items underneath them, and a subtotal for each category. And then it repeats my student names every few columns so that as I get a bigger gradebook and scroll out to the right, I can still see how they line up with the students. Now keep in mind you have an option for how many students you see per page. So if you don't see all of your students on one page, check this item and make sure that you're seeing them all on that page. or that you're going to the second page if you have that many students. I'm going to go back to Manage Grades. Now, as I was saying before, you don't have to leave this on the settings that you made initially. So let's say I'm going into my settings, and now I have 3 tabs. Personal display options are your personal options for you, what you want to see on your screen. And so these are the different items that you can see for students. You can see their points grade, the grade scheme symbol that we saw before, the grade scheme color. There's your number of characters, number of columns before your user details repeats. That means those number of columns in inner grades that it shows you before it repeats your students' names again. Number of users before column header repeats. So you can change this. Right now, you get 10 rows before it repeats those column headings for you again of what your grade items are. And you can, again, make this smaller or larger depending on what you personally prefer. This is how often it repeats the final grades for the students to see, for you to see as you're scrolling across your grade book. And you can also set a default for what you want to see when you click on this grades button up here. If you want to see that Manage Grades screen, then you can leave it on the default. Or you can switch it to seeing these grade settings first, seeing grade schemes, or if you want it to take you back to the setup wizards, which are what those initial steps are called that we went through. You can also set to see inner grades, which is that spreadsheet view. I'm going to leave it on the default. Let's save that page. Then right here, it's not very intuitively named. Org Unit Display Options. Those are the display options for your students, for what you want your students to see on their grades screen. And again, you have your decimals displayed, the student view of whether you want them to see points grades, the symbol, the color, there's the decimals again, characters displayed, final grade calculations, whether you want them to see that. And again, save that page before you leave it. And finally, we have calculation options. And you see here your weighted grades, your points grades, whether we want the calculated final grade or the adjusted final grade to be released, how we want it to treat ungraded items, and the auto update that again is very important to keep selected. So let's say I'm going to change how I grade and I'm going to make this weighted grades now. Save. It'll ask me to confirm that. And now I can close this screen. Now you see I have warnings up here. So if your categories are not adding up, it will warn you across the top of the screen that the math isn't working out quite right. Because what's important to remember is that within each category, the weighted totals, the weight has to add up to 100%. So right now it adds up to 20% in that category. So I can either add more quizzes for it to add up to 100, or I can change those weight values. Also, not only does it need to add up to 100% within each category, but the categories added together must add up to 100%. So the numbers in these gray bars must add up to 100% for your grade calculations to come out correctly. Now, if you want to edit a grade item or a category, you have these drop-down arrows next to the name of each one. So I can select that and edit grade item, or I can enter grades manually, or I can view the statistics or the event log, which shows me if I have deleted something. So let me edit that. And so this lets me adjust the weight and, adjust all of those settings that I have already set up, when we first went through this. But the new part here is the weight. So I can adjust that weight here. I'm not going to adjust it right now because I'm not adding enough items to equal 100 anyhow. So it's still going to give me that warning. But that just gives you an idea of where to go so that you can set up those weighted categories should you choose to do your gradebook with weighted grades. Let me pause right there before I go on to adding a syllabus and see if there are any questions. Oh, I'm going to need to unmute everybody. Okay, I've unmuted everybody. Are there any questions?
Scott asked, is there any advantage to creating grade item categories if you are grading by points instead of by weight?
The advantage is in how your gradebook appears to students and how it's organized. If you have the categories that break down the different types of items for them, it's going to be a lot easier for them to find what grades they're looking for when they go to their gradebook, rather than filtering through one big long list of all of your grade items. Does that help?
So you are all unmuted. If you want to ask questions, you can speak up. And I think Ala raised a question in the chat. She said somewhere at the beginning there was an option to import grades. How does that work?
Okay, the trick with importing and exporting grades in D2L is, and let me close this little window. Let me go back to the gradebook and show you. So when you're in the Enter Grades section, you have an option to export. Where is it? There it is. To export your grades. And that exports it to, an Excel file, CSV, and it exports the exact format that D2L needs to keep that accurate. So if you're importing grades, you really need to have exported that first, and then make your changes to the grades and then import it. You don't want to export it and then add columns or add rows or something and then try to import it again, because that will kick off an error and it won't be able to import that because it's looking for exactly what it exported to be able to import that information. Hopefully that makes sense. Any other questions?
No more questions from the chat.
Okay. Well, if I'm not hearing from anybody, I'm going to go ahead and put this on mute. And I'll go on to the, how we add a syllabus. Now the course map, you add to the course map by using the course builder, and that's under Edit Course, which is your last option on the blue navigation bar. So your course builder is here. And here's what the course builder looks like. This is also a good place to come. If you want to see what the start and end dates of your course are, they will display up here in the top with your course information. So we have to do two things to add a file to the course map. You can't just add a file by itself. It has to be within a module. Modules appear like folders on the course map. So the module icon is this first one under Build Outline. And this is all just click and drag. So I'm going to click and hold on that and drag it over to the gray box until it turns orange. And that turning orange lets you know that it's in the right place. I'm going to drop that. Now, like with everything else, we have to give it a name. Oops. Okay, course syllabus. And I'm not going to select anything else on this page. If you add notes in here, just so you know, those don't actually display to the students. So you don't want to put any content into the module notes that you want students to see. Create. So now I have a module. And if we go back to the beginning of the course, to the home page, you'll see now we have what looks like a folder on the course map. And that's what your modules will look like. Let's go back to our course builder. Okay, so here's my module. I'm going to click on it so that it's highlighted with the yellow, not yellow, sorry, orange outline. Then over here, I get a bunch of different options. So I can edit that module and change the name. I can actually put it into a draft status so that nobody can see it while I'm working on it. Just remember, if you do that, you have to come back and select Published for others to see it. And I can just upload files. So if I select Upload Files, it lets me choose a file from my computer. Oh, these are all pictures. So I'm going to pick a PDF file. Upload. And now you see that the file is uploaded and highlighted. Underneath, it's indented slightly, so it's underneath my module. And if I return to the course homepage, again, you see it as a folder. When I click on that, there's my file. And students can open it in D2L, or they have the option to download it. That's what the download button looks like, the little down arrow with a bracket. That actually is a pretty big file, so it may take a little bit too long for it to render. We'll just go back to the home page. And that's all there is to adding a syllabus file to the course map. And that's pretty much what you can do to set up a basic course shell. You'll have your grade book, and students can go check on that and check their grade anytime without having to email you. And then you have your basic syllabus. Now, one step I didn't cover that I'm going to go ahead and talk about is releasing that final grade calculation. So back in grades, we have to go to Enter Grades. Remember, I said you can select for it to automatically keep it updated, but then you have to come in and do this process to actually release those grades. So what we're looking for is the final grade calculation item at the top of the column, and it has a drop-down arrow. And what we want to do is use grade all. And you see here I have a list of all of my students. And again, you want to make sure they're all on the same page. So select a large number per page. And at the top of the list, I have this little checkbox. And once I check that, it selects everybody in the list. Then I want to select Release, Unrelease. And that fills in all the checkboxes in this column. Once I click Save, and yes, I do want to do that. Okay, now I can close this page. And now you see next to the final grade calculation, there's that, and it may be hard to see, that it's an open eyeball is what that is supposed to be. And that means that those grade calculations are now visible to your students. If you don't see the eyeball, your students cannot see their final grade calculation. Now, as a reminder, we have our CMU Online tab in MavZone. Oh, that's the Zoom screen. There we are. There's what the CMU Online tab in MavZone looks like. And over on the right, we have our quick guides. And in the faculty quick guides, right here is the one for grades. And it has both a video and a document that you can view or download. And we also have quick guides for all of the other tools in D2L. So for your course builder, for your quizzes, for everything you might want to use in D2L, there is a step-by-step quick guide. And if you go through this and you still have a question, feel free to call one of the instructional designers. And you can find our contact information over here on the right under the Distance Ed team.